and foundation of all good qualities, I think is the one we have. Yeah, thanks. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect Guru. Correctly following the Guru is the root of the path. By my clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. When I have discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, it is extremely difficult to find again and is greatly meaningful, please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. When I have found definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collection of shortcomings and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcomings of samsaric perfections, there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. They are the door to all suffering and they cannot be trusted. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought, with great remembrance, alertness, and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the individual liberation vows the root of the teachings my essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother transmigratory beings. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme Bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only Bodhicitta, without familiarizing myself with the three types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vow of the sons of the victorious ones with fervent effort. By my having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. When I have become a suitable vessel for training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. At that time, the base of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping my vows and samaya purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Then, when I have realized exactly the vital points of the two stages, the essence of the tantric sets, and am enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions with effort, without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who correctly accomplish it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify complete the collections of outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma, and by completing the qualities of grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. So if we spend 1 or 2 minutes trying to generate Bodhicitta motivation, think for the sake of all sentient beings, infinite mother sentient beings, who are suffering so much in cyclic existence, have been since beginningless time and will continue to endlessly unless they're shown the way out. For their sake, I myself have to achieve enlightenment so that I can show them the way. And therefore I'm going to spend this time thinking about the path to enlightenment, stage of the path to enlightenment. So what we are reading together is the mid-length stage of the path by Rinpoche Amazon Kappa, and particularly within that, having gone through the stage of path in common with person of small capability and middling capability, now we're in the stage of path in common with the stage of path of the person of great capability, and so that's mainly about bodhicitta, how to generate bodhicitta, and how to practice the six perfections once you've got bodhicitta. Otherwise, bodhicitta is like wanting to achieve enlightenment, but you have to actually do something to achieve enlightenment, and that's in the six perfections. And then especially the last two are singled out for an in-depth treatment. So you have a big section on calm abiding, how to develop calm abiding, and special insight. And the special insight section is mostly about emptiness. A little bit about the special insight itself, but mainly about emptiness, which is its object. Because of course you can't meditate on special insight that realizes emptiness if you haven't realized emptiness. Okay. So I think where we got to, is on page 198. Yeah. I don't know why I can't. Well, I'm not sure about that, but anyway, I think that's where we got to. The thing is that it's quite interesting. Actually, I was translating for the Koban Kenrichi Kijichuni last night, or yesterday afternoon, my time. And so this actually came up. It was a question and answer, and so somebody asked about this, the kind of thing that we're talking about here. Oh, I can't get this out of the way. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I always have this thing trying to get rid of my image from the screen. Okay. Yeah, so it's actually sort of mentioned it last time, but it is quite interesting that normally we talk about this way of generating bodhicitta, meditating on bodhicitta, which has 7 steps. So literally it's called like the Gundin Mengaktun, so there's sort of like 7 instruction, 7 cause and effect instructions. Not very, maybe not a very interesting name, but quite revealing, because, you know, just underlining the fact that the 7 have a fixed order, because cause and effect have a fixed order. So yeah, and yet and then, so, you know, we tend to, there's some people call it the six causes and one effect, because, you know, the first 6 are in order to generate the last one, bodhicitta, and that's quite reasonable. Then, you know, you could just as well say it's the 1 cause and 6 effects, because the last 6 are the results of the first one. The last 5 are the results of the first 2. The last 4 are the results of the first 3, like that. And so now here is quite interesting that Lama Tsongkhapa takes these 7 and looks at them in terms of which ones are the causes of great compassion and which ones are the results of great compassion. So in other words, how he's talking about it here is you've got the 4 causes and the 1 effect, great compassion, and then it's 2 results, right? 2 that come after that. Right, 4 and 1 is 5, then 2 is 7. And this very much fits in with Chandakirti in his Madhyamaggavatara, when he talks about how amazing compassion is. He talks about how it is so important at the beginning, middle, and end. And so it's like, it's quite interesting that also. I mean, when you learn, when you study that text, and it's sort of, it's a big thing, you know, that instead of, because it's traditional, you know, when the great masters of the past, maybe even now, I don't know, but certainly in the past, when they would compose a treatise, then they would first of all pay homage to some particular enlightened being, usually, you know, like maybe to Chenrezig, maybe to the Buddha, maybe to Manjushri. And Chandakirti singles out great compassion. And it's interesting. So why doesn't he single out Bodhicitta? What's so special about great compassion? It's important, of course, but why didn't he single out Bodhicitta? No idea. But anyway, so Lama Tsongkhapa sort of, you know, it's like he's following Chandakirti in putting great compassion right at the center in these 7 meditations. They all kind of like revolve around great compassion. It's quite interesting. And also, yeah, anyway, that's something I'll cover later. But why not loving kindness, for example? So with compassion, you're looking at the suffering of sentient beings. You want them to be free of that suffering. Loving kindness, you're looking at how they want happiness, but they're not experiencing happiness, so you want them to be happy. Why not? Why isn't loving kindness? Why isn't it sort of? Why doesn't it get the center stage kind of thing? Why? What's the amazing thing about great compassion? These are things to think about. It's quite interesting to think about. You think about this kind of thing, and gradually your sort of understanding of great compassion itself and bodhicitta and the way of generating bodhicitta, I think it begins to develop and become, you know, more something deeper. Anyway, so I just got this feeling that this is not where we left off, and yet it's the 25th, right? Yeah, so definitely we finished. So we finished towards the bottom of the page, and 198. All right. Yes, and so well, some of the things that are going to come up. Kirimji was in particular in relation to great compassion and nature of great compassion. Of course, we're going to be coming across that later on. We've got a few things to go through first, but great compassion. He was saying, actually, there's certain questions we might have about great compassion and what it really means, and to have it, and so on. That actually the great masters, they have different ways of looking at it, and so it's like last night they were trying to push him to give us like so what is it, how are you gonna, what's right, what's wrong? He says, yeah, you just have to think about it. There's something to think about. Anyway, so now though, so we looked at how the first four are the causes, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's right. First four are the causes for great compassion. Now, the way in which the last two, the extraordinary attitude and bodhicitta, are the effects of great compassion. It says their effects. I think what it means to say is the effects of great compassion. So then, so if you think to yourself, so this is a little bit about why not go straight from great compassion to bodhicitta, which is a very good question, actually, because what is great compassion? What's the difference between just compassion and great compassion? So compassion is always going to be like a mind wanting to free at least one person from suffering, maybe 2, 3, 100, maybe everybody on the planet, including all the insects, animals, and so on. But anyway, for any number of sentient beings from 1 upwards, then there's limitless compassion or immeasurable compassion, like with the four immeasurable thoughts. How does that go? And in the way that you it's stated or written in one Joche, which means preparatory practice manual that many people are familiar with, recite. So there it says it's got the 4 immeasurable thoughts. So in the case of compassion, it would be how wonderful, this is how it's usually translated anyway, which I think is fair enough. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. May they be free from suffering and its causes. That's the second one. Second thought. Third thought. I myself will free them from suffering and its causes. And then lastly, there is a request to the Guru deity, maybe Chinrezio, the Lama Chöpa Merrittfield or whoever. Anyway, Lamala, Guru deity, for blessings to be able to actually do that. So that's limitless. That's the 4 lines, 4 points, 4 things about for how to meditate on great limitless or immeasurable compassion there. Otherwise, for the most part, there's a very much a short version. So it goes. It just says may they. Okay, so may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings have be free of suffering and its causes. You go like that. So it seems like really great compassion, if it's real, genuine, great compassion, of course it's for all sentient beings. That's one thing. Then another thing about it is, so thinking about all sentient beings, then in terms of the suffering, not just the suffering of pain that and unhappiness and so on that we would normally think about in relation to suffering. You know, you see somebody, like seeing an animal in pain, or somebody, you know, like one of your children or relative or so, and so on, seeing them sick, in pain, experiencing some kind of misfortune. Maybe they've just been swindled out of all of their savings or whatever, that kind of thing. You tend to think of compassion in those terms, right? I think we do, don't we? As I mentioned before, you know, the compassion becomes deeper, it's something deeper. You need a deeper kind of compassion to be able to look at people who are healthy and wealthy and so on, and feel the same kind of compassion. And then not just that, but even on a deeper level, seeing how they still have the third kind of compassion that we usually talk about, you know, when we talk of three types of suffering that came earlier in this text. The so the pervasive usually call it the pervasive suffering of conditioning, is to do with, you know, the fact that as long as you're in cyclic existence, then you're bound to experience the pain, you know, like the worst kind of pain and so on, eventually, not occasionally, but like again and again. So the suffering, you know, that you're thinking about is you know, something really deep. You're seeing really deeply into the suffering situation of sentient beings, and this insight, that knowledge, comes from your insider knowledge about yourself, right? So having meditated on suffering with regards to yourself, then you understand that, you know, it's exactly the same for all the sentient beings. So that's two important things about great compassion. And then the other thing which really kind of like seals it is, you're not just thinking how wonderful it would be if they could be free of suffering and its causes, and you're not just thinking, may this happen, but you're also thinking, you know, I myself. So you're taking responsibility. I myself am going to free them from suffering and its causes. So that's the real great compassion. So if that's what real great compassion is, then, so again, if I just go through what these seven are, in case you're not familiar. So recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother, then thinking about their kindness, because they've been our mother so many times in past lives, because there's no beginning to cyclic existence, there's no beginning to lives in cyclic existence. In other words, there's no limit to how many times we've been born. There's no limit to how many times we've been born as a human. So actually, the conclusion is that everybody has been our mother so many times and has been so kind, taking care of us with so much kindness. We'll be talking about that more later on. And so thinking of the kindness, then the repaying the kindness, which means having recognized that kindness, then you have this, you make up your mind that it would be wrong not to repay that kindness. It would be wrong not to help the sentient beings who've been so kind to us now that they need it. They do need our help. So you think, I'm definitely going to repay that kindness. How I'm going to repay it is, since they've been looking after us, taking care of us so many times in so many past lives. So, if I buy them a cup of tea, then that should be, or a cup of coffee, then we'll be quits, we'll be even. Like that, right? That's not enough. So anyway, you end up thinking to yourself, well, what they want, just like me, what they want is happiness. They don't really have any idea about what real happiness is and what's possible. So what I want to do is, I want them to have the most perfect happiness, which is happiness of enlightenment, taking responsibility there. Just deciding to repay their kindness by in that way, and they don't like suffering, and yet they experience so much suffering. So that's what I have to do. It's very similar to the special attitude which comes later, but it's sort of like laying the foundation. There's some more things to go before you get to the actual the special attitude. So then, so that's repaying the kindness. Then the what I called heartwarming love, and there's so it's Yongi Jumper, and in that class last night, I was trying to remember. I can't remember what expression the person who's asking the question used. It was some quite complicated thing, but anyway, I like heartwarming love. I like that one. I've been using that for many years. So heartwarming love, which means now, having gone through those first few steps, now sentient beings appear to you to be, well, you could say pleasing. Some people use the word pleasing. So it's to do with the way they appear to you. They appear very pleasing. Sort of like it. I think it's a bit like every time you see a sentient being. I mean, it's almost difficult to imagine, but you can just about imagine. Like any sentient being you see, just kind of like it just warms your heart. You're just so pleased to see them. You have that, so it's like that sort of in terms of the appearance, not so much how you it's more to do with how they appear to you, how they seem to you. The way they seem to you is something that brings this warmth into your heart. I think that's a bit why I call it a heartwarming love. But anyway, it's a mind to which all sentient beings have this very pleasing appearance to you, pleasing, beautiful appearance to you. The word yong in Tibetan, you see, in some contexts, it gets translated as beautiful. Like, for example, when they talk about the way that the offering goddesses appear, they use this word yong, and it's very natural for people translators to say beautiful. They have this. They look very beautiful, not just pleasing or nice or something. What's the word he uses here? I can't remember now. It comes a bit later. Anyway, so yeah. Then sometimes, anyway, it's a yong, yidong. They talk about when we take the Bodhisattva vows using the in the actually comes up in the Vajrayogini practice. So it talks about the Jiangchu, Chechuk, Yon Chepaki. So I shall engage myself in, for want of a better word, the beautiful practices of the Bodhisattva. So beautiful or pleasing, whatever you look. I looked at the translation earlier on, and the translator used the word pleasing. So it is pleasing, but I don't know. But also beautiful. I don't know if that really is so suitable. But anyways, how would you describe Bodhisattva practices and six perfections? Pretty amazing, anyway. Yawn. Quite beautiful, really. Yeah. Also pleasing. So anyway, so that then So then based on that, the great compassion. Okay. So then after the great compassion, normally in this list of 7, then you've got the special attitude where you take responsibility, and then the bodhicitta, right? The final one. So if that 5th one, whatever you call it, whether you call it compassion or great compassion, anyway, it's supposed to mostly people agree it's called great compassion. If it's really great compassion, that means you've already taken responsibility. So why do you need the special attitude? Special attitude is already there. Special attitude means on top of the compassion and loving kindness and so on, taking responsibility. But you've already taken responsibility. So this is where it gets to be a little bit puzzling sometimes. And if sometime along the way you have found yourself puzzling over this, then that's good. That's great. It's something to puzzle over, really. So I will, I don't know. Well, so as I said, Geshe the, ABC teacher from in Singapore. So as I said, he made the point that, different scholars, different masters say different things, and they have different ways of looking at things, and they're not contradictory. It's just sort of like different ways of looking at it. So according to, I don't know if I mentioned this already. Anyway, maybe no harm to mention it again. According to what one of his, or maybe it might be his main teacher, who's the present Ganatripa. So he said that although the 5th one is called great compassion, it's not the real great compassion. The real great compassion comes up when you with this the 6th point, which is the special attitude. When you add on top of that great compassion, which isn't the real great compassion, when you add on to that taking responsibility, then it's the real great compassion. So it's when you have this, when you meditate on the special attitude, that's when you get the real great compassion, and also the real loving kindness, because the special attitude has got 2 aspects to it. One is loving kindness, and one is the great compassion. You could almost call it great loving kindness, because it's where the loving kindness, on top of wanting and thinking how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could have happiness and the cause of happiness, which Lama Zopa Rinpoche like to replace with, by saying how wonderful sentient beings could achieve enlightenment and the cause of enlightenment. Because he said, actually, with loving kindness, where you see the sentient beings are lacking in happiness, and you want them to achieve happiness, you're not thinking chiefly, anyway, how wonderful it would be if they could have food and drink and good health and so on, because those are temporary. You don't want to give them just this temporary happiness. What do you want to give them? The happiness of enlightenment, of course. Why would you want to give them something that falls short of the best kind of happiness that is possible? So Lama Zopa used to say that. But anyway, so that kind of makes sense, but not everybody agrees with it. I can tell you that. Not everybody agrees with that. That the great compassion that's in this list, the one that's called great compassion, the 5th one, that it's not the real great compassion. So it gets quite interesting anyway. But that, for me, that works anyway. So okay, the 5th one is called great compassion, but the real great compassion, it's not the real great compassion. The real great compassion comes when you take responsibility, which is with the 6th one, the special attitude. Okay, what I'm being? Because now I've lost my page number. Oh yeah, okay, here we are. So Anyway, so the point is, this person, well, he doesn't say it's a particular person has said this, but Lama Tsongkhapa says, if you think, if this is what you think, it's not so clear from the English translation that that's what he's saying, but what he's actually saying, so if you think, when compassion arises based on such a gradual training of the mind, and the desire, on such a gradual training of the mind, the desire to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings arises after that, which is kind of true, because this person is thinking the fifth one is great compassion. Great compassion means taking responsibility. And once you've taken responsibility, the next thing is bodhicitta, because just like they usually say with the sixth one, the special attitude, you take responsibility and then you think, yeah, but actually I can't even handle my own situation, let alone other sentient beings. I can't even liberate one sentient being, so what am I talking about? Liberating and enlightening all sentient beings. And then you think also that, well, like, what about a bodhisattva? What about an arhat? Arhats, if you're an arhat, you would be able to lead some sentient beings to that state, but you just wouldn't have the capacity to really work with all sentient beings. You've got to achieve enlightenment. So it's kind of right. After great compassion, if you think great compassion includes taking responsibility, then the next thing would be bodhicitta. It's a very good point, actually. But anyway, Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't agree. Okay. So I think Lama Tsongkhapa is agreeing with me. Okay, so the desire to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings arises after that. So that should be enough. You shouldn't need to have another step in between. Special attitude, taking responsibility, is already there. Why is the extraordinary attitude inserted between them? This is like the question that he's looking at. So then Lama Tsongkhapa says, Shravakas and Prajika Buddhas do have immeasurable compassion and love. So it's not so clear from the way it's been translated, but he's saying, they have immeasurable compassion and they have immeasurable love. What does that mean, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable love? The mind is thinking, if only sentient beings could have happiness, and if only they could be free of suffering. Also the causes, actually. Okay. So they have that. Here's here's in solitary rises, or Shravakas and Prajika Buddhas. So these, I mean, whether you think of just the people who are on those paths, or the arhats, the ones who've reached that final goal, they do have immeasurable compassion. They do have immeasurable love. So that's I don't know if you really want to hear this, but anyway, the thing is, you see, the way the four immeasurables are expressed in the preparatory practices. Remember the way I just said, like, okay, so with great compassion, number one, how wonderful it would be, right? If sentient beings could be free of suffering, the cause of suffering. Then may they be free of suffering, the cause of suffering. Second one, right? Third one, I myself will free them from suffering and the cause of suffering. Then the request. So does that mean that the heroes and solitary rises have all of those? I don't think it does. I think when Lama Tsongkhapa says that they have immeasurable compassion and immeasurable loving kindness, he doesn't mean like in the George Cho practice. What he means is just this: they have the immeasurable love which thinks, what does it say? If only sentient beings were to meet with happiness, and if only they could be free of suffering, which is, I think, maybe the same as the first of the the 4 points that comes in the preparatory practices. In other words, how wonderful it would be if they were free of suffering and the cause of suffering. How wonderful that would be. So anyway, they have that. They have immeasurable compassion. They have immeasurable love. So obviously he's saying they don't have the great compassion. And in fact, he goes on to say, yet those who are not Mahayanis do not. So in other words, who are not Bodhisattvas. Does he mean that? Or people like us who are sort of like followers of the Mahayana? Do not take on the responsibility to accomplish happiness and eliminate suffering for every sentient being. They don't take responsibility. So you could really, it would be quite reasonable to understand what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here is that they have great compassion, but they don't take responsibility. They don't have the special thought. They have great compassion, they don't have the special thought, no special attitude. And compassion without the special attitude isn't great compassion, right? So it's almost like he's saying, yeah, actually it's true. The great compassion in that list isn't the real great compassion. The real great compassion only comes when you have the special attitude, when you take responsibility. Okay, so do not take on the responsibility to accomplish happiness and eliminate suffering for every sentient being. Therefore, they must generate the especially brave attitude. Well, anyway, okay. The especially brave attitude, which is the special attitude of which is the special attitude like we've had in these this list of 7. So those well, anyway, not just the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, anybody who wants to have great compassion, on top of compassion, they've got to add the special attitude, which means taking responsibility. And also so then he goes on to say, so this is like well, anyway, this is understood from a quotation from the Questions of Sagaramati Sutra, which is quoted in this commentary on the Sublime Continuum. So that can often, when it says simply commentary without saying who, it often means it's the auto commentary, the commentary on the text by the author of the text. But Sublime Continuum, the Uttara Tantra, is by Maitreya, and so he's got his 5 texts, that we have, we still have, we have the 5 texts by Maitreya, and there aren't any auto commentaries, so it's probably the commentary by a Sangha. And Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't quote it himself. Maybe if we were to read a Sangha's commentary, we would come across that quote. And otherwise, I don't know what it's. I mean, obviously, it's saying something like this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made this. He wouldn't have mentioned it. But yeah. But I know that just while we're talking about it, sorry, while I'm talking about it, to be honest, they do talk about 2 types of compassion, 2 levels of, I think you could say 2 levels of great compassion. But anyway, there's just, can you imagine where you've got 2 people, maybe it's the parents of the child that's like fallen into a pool and is drowning, can't get out. Both of them as parents are going to feel this just no question, they totally want to to rescue the child. But one of them is maybe just doesn't have quite the courage, the spontaneous courage that goes with it. But the other one, just without thinking, just jumps in. Might even drown along with the child for all we know. But anyway. So, do you think that actually, which one is preferable? Which one is stronger? Which one is better? Just for argument's sake, the one where maybe the one who doesn't jump in doesn't have quite the courage, or maybe they can see that it would be pointless because they're going to drown as well. But okay, so I'm going to assume we're not talking about the one who has worked out that it would be pointless because the child can't swim and can't get out, and also they can't swim, so they would both drown. Not like that. The one who just doesn't quite have the courage, right? Just isn't brave enough. They really, they take responsibility totally, but they don't quite have the courage. And the other person totally has the courage and just jumps in. So it seems, anyway, you can maybe make up your own mind about that. It seems that that when we talk about great, because some people say that heroes and soldiers realize can have that first kind of great compassion where they've, or maybe not just the heroes and soldiers realize, a person might have that kind of compassion, but it's not the great compassion that that we have in the in these seven. The great compassion in these seven is the one which will actually has that force and power and strength and courage to really just jump in there and start doing things. So anyway, they talk about that. They do say that. So the heroes and soldiers don't have that second kind of compassion. They have the first one. Whereas in the case of the Bodhisattva, then they have that second one where they're ready to jump in. And I suppose what they jump into is the practice of the six perfections. Anyway, okay, so I'll just read to the end of this paragraph, then we'll have a few minutes to think about this. So anyway, so that according to maybe a Sangha's commentary on the questions of Sagaramati, no, on the Sublime Continuum, which has a quote from the questions of Sagaramati Sutra. After the mind, which will free sentient beings. So I thought that was a bit awkward in me. After the mind to free sentient beings, which will free, but which will free in the sense of the mind that is thinking I will free. After the mind thinking I will free sentient beings has arisen in this manner, then you would think to yourself, so I'm still unable to complete even the welfare of one sentient being because of my present situation. I just can't do it. Like, as I am now, I just can't do it. Not only that, but even if I were to attain the state of an arhat, two types of arhat, I still would not be able to complete the welfare of. I still would not be able to complete the welfare of even a few beings, and the welfare that I could help, the goal that I could help them achieve would be just, the same level as myself, liberation, not enlightenment. I would not be able to establish them in omniscience, in the state of Buddhahood. So who can complete the temporary and final welfare of limitless beings? Who can, help sentient beings on a temporary level and, deep level, ultimate level? If you reflect in this vein, you'll come to understand that only a Buddha is able to do this, and you will generate the wish to attain Buddhahood for the welfare of sentient beings. Okay, so let's stop and think a couple of minutes about that. Really, like, what is What is great compassion? Who has great compassion? And maybe you might feel like thinking, well, who cares who else has it? I mean, main thing is, do I have it or not? And do I want it? Poking our noses into other people's business, criticizing our hats. I mean, the main point, of course, is we do need great compassion. There's not too much to dispute about that. We need great compassion because the great compassion will be what really gets us to the Bodhicitta. And once you have the Bodhicitta, then you're in the Mahayana path, and then you should be able to just keep going forward towards enlightenment. So we need the great compassion, which means feeling an intense sense of compassion towards each sentient being, taking responsibility, and we tend to feel compassion for those that we feel close to. And we don't feel compassion for those that we don't feel close to. And even the opposite to those people that we completely, detest. So we need a way to make all sentient beings, through our way of thinking, so that they become, so that we feel close to each and every one of them. So, this is the kind of thing we need. Anyway, that's going to be coming up. So then the actual gradual training, the actual way of training in these 7 must be. The actual training has 3 points: training the mind that strives for the welfare of others, training the mind that strives for enlightenment, and identifying the bodhicitta as a result of that training. So you might have heard there's an often quoted line in Maitreya's Abhisamaya, which says, or it might be 2 lines actually, and of course I always forget exactly how it goes, but what it says is that bodhicitta bodhicitta is the mind that wants enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So in other words, thinking, wanting to benefit sentient beings, therefore wanting enlightenment. So it has those 2 wishes connected to it. The one to help sentient beings and the other to achieve enlightenment. So training the mind that strives for the welfare of others, that's the first one. Then training the mind that strives for enlightenment. So those are the 2 aspects, the 2 things about bodhicitta. And then talking about the bodhicitta that comes as a result of training your mind in that way. So training the mind that strives for the welfare of others. So this has got 2 points: laying the foundation for that mind to arise, and then actually the actual generation of that mind. So then this, so laying the foundation for that mind to arise. This has 2 points: achieving an equanimous mind towards sentient beings and establishing that they all have a likable aspect, which I don't like much at all, actually. Establishing them in a likable aspect makes more sense to me. And it's the same thing, the likable, like beautiful, likable, pleasing, so heartwarming, that kind of aspect. Okay, so in other words, when we do the meditation of bodhicitta with the 7 cause and effect instruction, well, the first one actually is the first 3 are bring you to the point where you can have everybody, all sentient beings, with this very pleasing appearance. And equanimity is not one of them. Okay, so equanimity is not one of the 7, and yet you have to have it before these 7. So why isn't it one? Why would we not have the 8 cause and effect instruction with equanimity as the first? And what they say is, which is quite interesting, again, something about it's because equanimity is not unique to the Mahayana path. It's something that the Hinayana, the Theravadins and so on practice as well. And in that case, what that makes you think is, well, that must mean that all of the 7 must be uniquely Mahayana. And yet we've heard also from Lama Tsongkhapa from what he seems to be saying is that basically entering the Mahayana, being a Mahayana person, is the same as generating bodhicitta and thereby becoming a bodhisattva. And yet the first 6 are before you become a bodhisattva. So it's kind of it, what's going on here kind of thing. But anyway, so first of all, Lama Tsongkhapa is going to talk about getting equanimity, how to meditate on equanimity. He gives some very important key points, and at the same time, he doesn't go into, as much detail maybe as you get with oral teachings. And I think maybe there's more in Pabonka's Liberation. I didn't look at it, but I think maybe there's more there. But anyways, this is all very useful, I think. Personally, I find it's very useful. This is really good to meditate on every day. If you don't meditate on these every day, the 7-point cause and effect instruction preceded by equanimity, how are you going to meditate on Bodhicitta? If you don't meditate on Bodhicitta, then how are you going to develop Bodhicitta? You might think, well, of course, there's the equalizing exchange self and others. Well, also, if you don't do that every day, then you kind of forget what it is eventually. And besides which, if you don't meditate on either of them, then what's going to happen with your Bodhicitta? What's going to happen with your Mahayana? So anyway, yeah. Anyway, the preliminary steps and the like, as explained above in the context of persons of lesser and medium capacity, should be adopted and maintained here. So what he's saying is, earlier on there was an explanation of the preparatory practices. There's 6 preparatory practices, starting with cleaning the room and things like that. And then also including, once you sit down to meditate, refuge and bodhicitta, if you can, then also the 4 immeasurable thoughts, and then the 7 limb prayer. And Lama Tsongkhapa actually quotes from the King of Prayers when he's explaining that. So the 7 limb prayer with mandala offering, and then making lots of requests, and then you actually do the meditation itself. So you do that before this as well. Then, new paragraph. If you do not first accomplish an equanimous mind, which is basically saying if you don't first achieve equanimity, having stopped the bias of attachment towards some sentient beings and hatred towards others, any love and compassion that will arise with partiality. So I don't know how many of you are looking at the book, but I mean, of course, it's amazing what he's done, the translator. But now and then, you have to. There's certain things that just don't seem to work. Okay, so if you do not first accomplish an equanimous mind, so he puts that then in there, which kind of seems to throw the whole thing out. And when I looked at the Tibetan, you don't. It's not. You could understand it in that way, but I don't think it makes sense. So if you do not first accomplish an equanimous mind, what's an equanimous mind? What's equanimity? It's you achieve it by stopping the bias of attachment towards some sentient beings and hatred towards others. Otherwise, the way he's with this then there, it's like if you don't first accomplish an equanimous mind, okay, so you've got the equanimity, then, so after that, having stopped the bias of attachment towards some sentient beings and hatred towards others, then your love and compassion, any love and compassion you do develop will be partial. It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, that's my conclusion. If you do not first of all accomplish the mind of equanimity by having stopped the bias of attachment towards some sentient beings and hatred towards others, then any love and compassion that arise will be, partial. And then this one is quite complicated. It's got lots of negatives in it. As they do not arise if you observe them without impartiality, you need to cultivate equanimity. So I puzzled over this. I thought, oh no, he's got too many negatives in here. But no, it's actually just right. They do not arise if you observe them without impartiality. So I think what that means is they will arise if you observe them with impartiality. Impartiality is what you want. Right? The impartiality is to do with them not being, not being biased, not having favorites and so on. Okay, so that's what he's saying. I don't know why all the negatives, but anyway, as they do not arise if you observe them without impartiality. So actually what you need to do is observe them with impartiality, and then they will arise. So in other words, you need equanimity. Then a new paragraph, I think. The two types. So this is a useful thing to understand. Because also, you see, when you're used to the four immeasurable thoughts, what's the immeasurable equanimity? You see, it's quite interesting because, okay, so now. Yeah, okay, so in the long version that I was mentioning earlier, that finishes the equanimity, right? So anyway, so the first one, you're developing love, right? How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could have happiness and the cause of happiness, right? So you're, bring up the mind of loving kindness in your mind, right? How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. So you yourself are generating compassion. How wonderful it would be if the sentient beings would never be free of happiness. Yeah, never be free from happiness. You're meditating on that joy. But now with the fourth one, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity. So now you're not, in the first bit, you weren't thinking how wonderful it could be if they could have loving kindness, how wonderful it would be if they could have compassion, how wonderful they would be if they could have joy. But here, you're thinking how wonderful it could be if they had equanimity. You get my point? How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred that hold some close and others distant. How wonderful it would be if they could have equanimity. So in the four immeasurable thoughts, the immeasurable equanimity is wanting others to have equanimity. It's not a meditation about me developing equanimity. It's you're wishing for them to have equanimity, right? But here with equanimity, it's not that. It's not that. The two types of equanimous mind that have been taught are that which has the appearance of lacking mental afflictions such as attachment, anger, and so forth in sentient beings. And I mean, it's a bit I have to be careful here, but the way it's put is not very straightforward. What it's saying is one type of equanimity is where you're wishing for the sentient beings to have equanimity. And the second type of way in which equanimity is taught is that in which there is no attachment or anger towards sentient beings. So in other words, you having equanimity without attachment and anger towards sentient beings. So there are those two ways in which equanimity is taught. One where you're looking at other sentient beings and wishing that they could have equanimity. And the other one is where you're trying to develop equanimity. And here it refers to the latter of these two. So what's useful about this is it helps you to not feel so puzzled when, okay, so the four immeasurables, it says very clearly how wonderful sentient beings could abide in equanimity. Is that what I'm supposed to be meditating on here with equanimity before meditating all sentient beings as my mother? No, it's not. The one to meditate on here is you and other sentient beings, some of who at the moment, it's just how we are. some of whom we're attached to, some we feel more like hatred and anger towards, and some we feel indifferent towards. And we're going to be going into that. Okay? Is that pretty straightforward now? Maybe it was a bit puzzling when it first came out, but anyway, that seems pretty simple. So that's useful. Then now he actually does start giving tips on how to do the equanimity meditation, and I think that in different Lamrim texts it's explained differently. I've definitely heard one of my teachers, or maybe more, explaining that to meditate on equanimity, what you do is you imagine in front of you friend, enemy, and stranger. And of course, immediately that sometimes it can feel a bit annoying, because like, I don't have enemies. I don't have people that I hate. But anyway, one point that it makes later on is this meditation doesn't stop enemies, friends, and strangers. And the person, there is such a thing as a person harming you. That's your enemy. What the equanimity is about is not getting angry with the person who harms you, right? Not hating them. And the person who helps you is your friend. That doesn't mean to say you need to show favoritism towards them, feel like attachment, like, oh, my dear friend, so kind, so helpful, so it's not to do with stopping the friend, it's to stop our attachment arising towards the friend. And then for those people in our lives who don't particularly help us and don't particularly harm us, then we have the tendency for equanimity, what you call it, you kind of like feel neutral about them. And so the equanimity meditation is aimed at stopping that as well. There are people in our lives who don't particularly help us and don't particularly harm us. This meditation is not aimed at stopping that, it's aimed at stopping our indifference towards them. And it's anyway, so it's quite a challenge really in some ways to work out what equanimity means, especially, getting a clear idea that feeling equanimity towards sentient beings isn't like feeling neutral towards sentient beings. That's not it. Doesn't mean being attached to everybody. Maybe that would be okay. Maybe if we were attached to everybody, it would be okay. But anyway, nobody ever says that, we should be attached to everybody. So it's not to do with being attached to everybody or angry towards everybody. And it's also not to do with being neutral towards everybody. So equanimity does not mean feeling neutral. Okay, yes, Shana, go ahead and ask.
These meditations, it sounds so great, and you want to do that, but in the mundane world, if you were to, okay, so say you had your husband or wife or your mother that are in this life here, asking you to do something, and somebody like came and ran into them or whatever, if you had equanimity in that moment to everyone, you might have it inside, but if you showed that equanimity, then your loved ones in this world would just freak out.
Yeah. And this is something that I think everybody wonders about at some point, and maybe for you might wonder about it for a long time. I mean, I think what was I going to say? I think the reason why this seems like an issue is because we still didn't quite get what equanimity is. So if you can try to remember that equanimity means not having the attachment and favoring people to the disadvantage of others, which is the main thing about the attachment, right? And not feeling hatred towards people, and not feeling indifferent towards people. If you can keep it in mind that that's what equanimity means, then I think it solves a lot of the confusion. Because your question is similar to I don't know exactly how to put it, but it's like we have responsibilities, right? Like the responsibility you have for your children and your family. I'm going to be saying almost like what you've just said, actually. So you have that kind of responsibilities. You have responsibilities. Equanimity does not mean that you shirk your responsibilities. I think maybe think of it like this. Yeah. So what can happen when you don't have the equanimity, then with family things, you might have the issue where you favor those who are close to you to the detriment of others. And that would be maybe a lack of equanimity. Whereas with equanimity, with genuine equanimity, then it would be totally reasonable for you to be going out to work and earning the money that you're going to be putting into your home and your family, feeding your family and not everybody else. If you were earning enough money, you might be able to do that kind of thing. But you see what I mean? That wouldn't be because of a lack of equanimity. It would be more like a lack, like um, that's what you're responsible for. If you did not, then never mind your family freaking out, everybody would freak out. I mean, like, like you come home and by the time you get home, you haven't got any money because you've given it away, not taking care of your family and your home. Then everything would be a big mess. So I'm not saying I've got this completely myself, but I think that I do think it's not to do with. I think it's very easy to slide into without even being particularly aware, the feeling that equanimity somehow is to do with being neutral towards everybody, or treating everybody in exactly the same way, so that you do. I mean, I guess shirk your responsibility isn't exactly the right word, but so anyway. So you have your responsibilities and you don't respect them. So I mean, I think that all of us would do well to think about this and think what it means to be able to you know lead a healthy kind of life with respect to family and friends and the rest of the people around us, while having equanimity. So maybe also it helps to think that there are different levels of equanimity and different levels of the opposite, of equanimity that we need to deal with. And so the lack of equanimity when it's at an extreme would be like with nepotism and giving giving all the opportunities. You get into a powerful position and you give all of the powerful positions around you to family and friends, irrespective of their abilities and so on. They could be people that are much more suited for the position, and you don't give it to them. It's just your friends. So that kind of extreme. So you would need, one level of equanimity to prevent that. And as I say, you see, I've seen it sometimes, where maybe the parents are not, they're not just, they're not just got their children that they love and care for, but it's like it doesn't matter if others suffer in order for me to be able to give the good things to my family. And maybe also, I don't know, on a practical level, I mean, living with equanimity and also going out to work to feed your family and so on. What do you think of when you see people uh, uh, living their life like that? How do you feel um, about that? Doesn't seem actually quite reasonable. Anyway, so also, I think just have to keep going back to the key point, which is that, which I think is quite revealing. Equanimity doesn't stop friend, enemy, and stranger. It stops the attachment and the anger and the indifference. That's equanimity. In a way, that kind of like solves any kind of confusion, really. So it's a question of identifying in your own mind any kind of attachment that you might have, and towards some people, the anger or dislike towards some people, indifference towards others, and overcoming that. Anyway, maybe we'll come back to it. When we get to the end of the equanimity meditation. Yeah. Did you want to say something else?
There was one thing. Do you think that that's the reason why Buddha, said that, like the monks and nuns, that's do you think that there is the reason, like establishing equanimity? Because when you're in a family or you have like worldly attachments, okay, there's like this expectation. I mean, you might have equanimity in your mind, like you might not be angry or you might not have attachment rise, but you're kind of still expected to take actions that could be interpreted as, not having equanimity.
I'm not sure
And
about.
so if you have
I'm not
monks and
sure.
nuns, they don't have.
That's also true, but the point about the monastics and the monastic life is that you have less things to do with your time that are distracting. You've got more time for learning and meditating and practicing, so it's easier from that point of view. So um, I still have my attachment to my family that I have to deal with, but I was really, okay, so I'm living at home with my mum at the moment, which involves certain just ordinary activities. But even when I'm at Land of Medicine, but I also have that, going shopping, doing my own cooking, and so it's just part of life. But still, it's kind of unbelievable just having it's just like all the time in the world to learn about these things and try to practice them, which some lay people do also have, but for the most part, it's just 9 till 5, isn't it? I think it's mainly that. Yeah, I think it's mainly that. In other words, if the Buddha established monasticism to make it easier for the people who choose that way to really live in equanimity, then I think you'd also say he established it so they would be able to develop wisdom and compassion and bodhicitta and concentration and everything. It makes everything easier. So how are we doing? I think we can stop there. Yeah, stop there. Yeah. Oops. if we can have the dedications up, please, Michael. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Due to all past, present, and future merits collected by me, and all the merits of the 3 times collected by numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, may Bodhicitta be generated in the hearts of all the sentient beings of the 6 realms, and especially in the hearts of everybody in this world, including all the students, benefactors, and volunteers in the FBMT organization, and particularly Land of Medicine Buddha. So we're not at Land of Medicine Buddha, but this is organized by LMB. May be generated in the hearts of all those who rely upon me, all those for whom I have promised to pray, and all those whose names have been given to me. May it be generated in my heart and in the hearts of all my family members, those who are living and those who have died. May the bodhicitta that has already been generated increase. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. I feel dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality, and just like Samantamatra as well. I feel dedicate all my roots of virtue with dedication praises the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times, in order to have good conduct. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. Yeah, this is good. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, the numberless Buddhas and the numberless sentient beings which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that state which is completely empty of existing from its own side, by myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. As long as any sentient being has not been liberated from samsara, may I abide in samsara to help them, even though I achieve highest enlightenment. By merely seeing, hearing, thinking about, or remembering me, as well as by touching me or talking to me, may all suffering instantly be pacified, and may there be happiness forever. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, or the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make requests. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels and the great waves of Bodhicitta of the children of victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, thank you. So, thank you, everybody, and see you next week.
Thank you, Venerable.
Take care.
Thank
Here
you.
is
Stay safe.
cloudy and raining. Surprise, surprise. See ya.